very warm welcome to our November Pacecast. I'm Anita Pace and it's great to have you with us. Today's guest is Rachel Di Clemente. Rachel is the Chief Executive of Hudgell Solicitors and has been instrumental in the firm's continued success in recent years. I'm looking forward to hearing about Rachel's past, present and her future plans, and it's great to have her with us. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Anita.
Thank you for taking time today to come and join us.
No problem.
So as we do with all our guests, we've asked Rachel to bring in something that's important to her, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it is and hearing all about it. So what have you brought in?
Right, well, this was the dilemma. I started off thinking I'd bring a picture of my kids, but they persuaded me not to. So I've dug out in the attic and I've found my first ever employment contract for when I took my first job straight out. Well, actually, I dropped out of university, but no doubt you'll interrogate me on that in a moment. But I went and I had my first trainee legal clerk job at a firm called Owen Mitchell. So I've dug that out and I was reminded about my measly salary in those days, which was about £7,500 a year. But yeah, I found it. I've kept this. I haven't been able to throw it out. I've lots of other things have come and gone, but this is something I kept hold of because it was a bit of a pivotal moment in my life and changed the direction it was going in quite considerably.
To where you are today. So there's a lot to unpick there. So obviously you're very successful in law now, but was that a conscious decision? Let's dial it right back to your early childhood and your upbringing. You mentioned there that you dropped out of uni, so it'd be interesting to know what you were studying at uni. But before that then, tell me a bit about the early days of Rachel.
Right, so I didn't ever really set out to do law, I don't think. I think it was probably on my list of wannabe careers, but not, at the top particularly. I was particularly studious during my equivalent to a GCSE years. And I was at an all-girls school then, which I hated, absolutely detested every minute of it.
Why did you hate it?
I wanted to be at home and I was away from home and I hated it. So I was particularly homesick for 5 long years. And
were you boarding then at the school?
I was boarding,
right,
yeah.
Okay.
I remember my first year, so I'd been 11, I think, and there was a postal strike. So you weren't allowed to ring home. So you couldn't even have a letter in those days. So I had a friend who was a day girl, I think, and her mum used to smuggle letters from home for me.
Oh, for you? Oh, sweet.
But no, it wasn't for me. I spent 5 years trying to come up with an excuse to go home, to be honest with you. But anyway, so no, so I studied a lot. That's all I did. I kind of worked very, very hard and did very well. Managed to persuade my parents to let me go to a different school for sixth form, which was down south.
And where was home at this point? So you were at boarding school?
Still where I live now,
right,
so
okay.
Up in Bedale in North Yorkshire. I went for sixth form, I went down to a place now not far from Leicestershire, actually, that kind of area, and wasn't particularly studious. I'd gone from an all-girls school to an all-boys school, and there ends that tale. So I stayed there. I didn't do well. I was distracted. That's the word. But I was enjoying myself more than I was when I was at the last school. So I went, I only lasted about 2 terms and parents pulled the plug and I ended up, so I started working, nannying, waitressing, that kind of thing, and went to college.
Was this still in Leicestershire then? Or
No, back up home.
Right.
And I went to a sixth form college part-time whilst I worked, and finished my A-levels. And then I went off to uni. So I didn't do well in my A-levels. After doing, straight A's in GCSE times, I ended up doing, well, I suppose it wasn't bad, but in my mind, it was horrendous for A-levels. And so I went up through clearing to Northumbria University, where my daughter has just started, actually. Well, she started a year ago. So I went there and I went through clearing and I just took anything I could get. And I ended up on a politics course, which was not what I had in mind at all. I didn't like uni life. The flat that they put me in with 3 other people, I think, was just horrible. It was above Black Garter pub. Mice infested. It was just horrendous. So I thought, I need to get a job here. So I got a job working.
Get a job so you didn't have to go to uni, or get a job so you could upgrade your living accommodation?
All of the above,
right,
yeah.
Okay.
So I got a job, and that's when I started working, and I liked working. I liked having my own money. I got myself a flat that was a bit nicer.
Still in Northumbria?
In Newcastle, right. Yeah. And I ended up working more than I went to uni. But I did.
And what was the job?
I worked in a retail shop called Morgan. Have you heard of that?
Oh, I remember Morgan.
Yeah, it was great in the day.
Yes, I can remember some of the outfits I bought from Morgan.
Yeah, it was pretty cool in the day. So I went there, and there was a shop upstairs called Daniel Footwear. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's kind of a West Yorkshire thing, I think now. But I loved the shoes, and I got talking to the chap that owned it, and he said, he said, what are you doing this weekend? I said, I'm going back to Leeds to see some friends. He said, well, do you want to come and work in my Leeds shop? If you like it, I'll give you a job up here in Newcastle. It paid more. The clothes were a bit, the shoes were nicer. So I went back to Leeds and I went to work for him for a day. And that's when things kind of changed, really, because I bumped into a chap, and I ended up moving in with this chap, getting married, and never went back to university. So that was the end of university.
So when you were working at Morgan and the shoe shop, you were still studying?
Yes, I was still studying.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, so then I ended up in Leeds.
So how old were you then?
18, 19.
That's young to be getting married.
I didn't get married till I was 22.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So much older.
But I ended up moving in, and then I thought to myself, crikey, my parents obviously livid.
Well, I want to talk to you about your parents. So obviously they sent you off to boarding school when I shouldn't say sent you off, like dismissing you, but you went to boarding school when you were younger, and then you went, maybe there was some disappointment with your education path after that.
Yeah.
And then you leave uni to go and work in a shop.
Yeah.
So what was your relationship like with your parents? Were they quite strict? Did they influence you at all?
No, do you know what? Compared to how I'd be if that was my daughter nowadays, that they were pretty good. I think they always wanted good things for me. My parents worked very hard to try and give me the very best I could have.
Because you're obviously very bright, and they will have recognised that. Certainly
I was also very headstrong.
Yeah,
there wasn't a lot of persuading me to do anything in those days. I was probably a bit of a nightmare, to be fair. My dad's always had the highest of standards, still does today. So I've spent a lot of my life trying to make him proud, to be honest with you. But no, I got a job in. Well, I started working in Leeds, I worked in a shop to start with, the shoe shop, and then I got a job at the airport. I was a disaster at that.
What were you doing at Leeds Bradford Airport?
Yeah.
What were you doing?
It was my biggest failure. I worked for a company called Service Air. They checked you into flights and put you on flights. And I just couldn't do it. I was just really bad at it. I found it very stressful, overthought everything, and it didn't last very long. So I thought, I need to get my life in order here, and I was having to try and find rent for somewhere to live. Didn't want to go back home and say I couldn't do it. So I went to the job centre at the bottom of Eastgate in Leeds. I often point it out to my kids now and say, that's where my life changed, children. But I went there, and there was an advert on the board for a trainee legal clerk. And I thought, I always fancied doing law. And actually, when I'd been at Northumbria University on the politics degree, I'd actually managed to persuade them to let me do a part-time law. So that's what I was doing, part-time law by then.
So why law? Were you inspired by LA Law on TV? Did you see it as a glamorous?
None of that. I just thought my parents would approve. That was it.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So you had that desire to get that approval.
Yeah. That was entirely it, to be honest with you. So I went for this interview with these two guys. They were both called Dave, and they worked at Owen Mitchell in Leeds. And I had an interview, gave it my all. Didn't really know what the job was, to be honest with you. Didn't hear anything. Called up their secretary at the time and said, am I going to have a job or not? She didn't know.
So you obviously desperately wanted it.
Desperately wanted it. Yeah. Anyway, long story short, they eventually gave me the job. And I started there in my first trainee legal clerk role in the Leeds office. Arrived the first day, thought I would be, doing secretarial role, and quickly learned otherwise. And within about half an hour, I had 300 clients. And I remember being given a dictation device, like a tape recorder, thinking that I was going to be typing for somebody. But no, that was for me to dictate onto. And I was like, no idea what I'm doing
So they recruited you and you didn't have the experience, let's be honest. You didn't have that relevant experience. And yet they saw something in you.
Well, you were heavily supervised. I had a great supervisor called Clive. He was wonderful. He used to call him Garfield as a nickname. And he was fabulous. And I just listened to everybody. And that's when I realised that work was for me and not going back to studies. Because I always had in my mind that I'd go back to uni. It was just a stumbling block. But no, I ended up parking my studies and never going back to them in that way. I just worked, and I I really worked flat out for many years. Hopefully I'm still working flat out now, but no, I got the bug. I loved my job. I've been very fortunate in that I've never not loved anywhere I've worked. I've been really, really lucky in that respect.
And was it the discipline of working that you liked, or was it law that you liked?
I love my clients. I've always loved my client. I've loved helping people.
And that comes through in what you do today a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, finding solutions for people. It's just, it doesn't have to be law, I don't suppose. It could be anything. And actually, after looking back on a 25-year career, a lot of what you do for your clients isn't just about the law. A lot of it's the other stuff, But I also loved the regime. I remember, this is so sad, but I remember being disappointed when it was a weekend. I mean, who feels like that?
Well, I do sometimes, but it's sad.
But yeah, I used to, I couldn't wait for a Monday. I couldn't wait to get back to work. And I got the bug. And so that's when my legal career started.
And did you find that you said you had 300 clients? Were you in a particular area of law, or was it?
Yeah, so back then, I used to be the person that recovered your uninsured losses if you had a motor accident. So I'd be claiming back your policy excess, your hire car, your injuries if you had injuries. It was just motor work. And so it was volume work. You had lots and lots of clients, and you'd never meet hardly any of them at that stage in my career. So it was very different to the work I've done more recently. But it was a good grounding, and I got lots of experience in a very short period of time.
So Owen Mitchell gave you your first leg up, if you like, into the area of law. But then where did you go from there?
I stayed there for about 4 years. The first time, I've been there twice. So I stayed there about 4 years, and I had my son. So I had my son Ross when I was in my early 20s, and I went back to work at Owen Mitchell straight afterwards. Well, in those days, actually, it's the same today. Something I'm really passionate about is maternity pay is just rubbish. So you only get paid 90% for 6 weeks, and then you go into statutory, and nobody can afford to be on statutory maternity pay if you're, earning the income in the household. So I went back after 6 weeks.
Right. Talk to me about that. How did that feel with a newborn?
Well, at the time, being in my early 20s, it felt great. Because I wasn't really ready to be sat at home being a mum. And, my everything now revolves around my children and has done. But I was very much, I always have been a working mum. And I've managed to make that work through lots of support that I've got from my family and friends. But yeah, no, it didn't bother me at the time. It bothers me now looking back. But at the time, early 20s, it was just like, let's get back to work.
And you're working full time?
Full time, yeah. And I remember even in those days, I had to, I think childcare, my first childcare bill was about £550 a month, which was most of my salary, and that's something I'm so passionate about now, that our current benefit system does not support people that want a career.
Yeah,
you have to afford to have a child nowadays, which can't be right. So no, I went back to work and then decided, actually, it was a long way. It was about 40 miles to work. And I got offered a job by one of the mums at nursery who set up a law firm in Wetherby. So I went to Wetherby to work for about 6 years, and I had my daughter while I was there as well. So while my children were young, I was very fortunate to have found somewhere that was quite small, easy to get to, and I learned an awful lot because they kind of did a bit of everything there. So my skill set was kind of diversified quite a lot, and I stayed there for a few years, about 6 years, I think, before going back to Irwin Mitchell.
Which is unusual, isn't it? Not many people leave a company. There are some that leave a company and go back, but it's not the norm.
No.
So how did that happen?
I've always, as I say, I've always loved everywhere I've worked and stayed in touch with everybody. And I remember having to move. There was something going on with the firm I was at. I think it was winding down from memory or something, and one of the partners was leaving or something. So it was. I needed another job, and I couldn't afford to be out of work for a week. So I remember ringing my boss at Irwin Mitchell back and saying, I need a job. And they were like, well, you've been gone 6 years, Rach. And I was like, I don't care what it is, I just need a job. So that's how I ended up in Newcastle, and they sent me to work in their Newcastle office. So I went there and spent the next 7 years there. And that's when the work I did there was kind of where I kind of grew my real passion for the work I was doing. And I was looking after a lot of people that worked and had injuries at work. And I was also looking after a lot of seriously injured people. So people who had life-changing accidents. And that's kind of where I spent most of my proper law days, I call them, where I actually had clients, and went to court and all that kind of stuff.
So that's where you're having the relationship with the clients, as opposed to
and I'm still in touch with many of them now. I met one, now let me think. About a year ago, I got a Facebook message out of the blue from one of my clients. I'd looked after her from when she was 14 till she was about 20, 6 years, long time. And she had a really, really nasty injury, and she's now, bless her, grown up. She's got 3 kids of her own, and we met. I think I'd met one of her children before the case settled, but I'd never met the other 2. So I met them at a garden centre in County Durham, and I went there and we spent all afternoon just reminiscing, and it must have been, I can't remember now, at least 10 years since that case settled.
That's testament to you and the relationships you've built with your clients, that they want to stay in contact. And
yeah, it's very hard. You spend many years with clients, and you quite rightly become very close to them, So I've got, I set my computer passwords around my old client names and things like that. It's just part of what I remember about, the last kind of like 25 years. But yeah, no, really great clients. Loved the work I was doing there. Great place to be in Newcastle. Lovely people I worked with, made some lifelong friends there, and stayed there, as I said, for about 7 years. And my daughter was just about to go to secondary school. And you're not going to believe this, but I decided that it wouldn't be half a bad idea to send her to where I went.
After the experience you had.
Oh. Yeah, there's no explaining that. I don't know what made me think of that.
Maybe you thought you turned out all right as a result there.
I don't know. I think it was a different place nowadays. When I was there, it was a bit archaic, to be honest with you. And also, they allow day girls now, so I could take her to school, So anyway, I took her thinking, she won't like it anyway. Of course, she loved it.
So you moved back to Yorkshire?
So knowing that she was going to, I've always lived where I've lived, so I've always commuted.
So you were commuting from Yorkshire to Newcastle?
Yeah, it's about an hour. Wasn't bad.
Oh, okay.
It's a lot closer than Hull.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
So no, and then I got asked to go for an interview at a firm called Minster Law, who were in those days based in York, and it was on Fulford Road, and my daughter's school was just outside Fulford. So I thought, well, this could be really handy.
And where was your son? Where was his
He
school?
was in Ripon.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So not far.
Closer to home. So I went for this interview, and I thought I really didn't want to go and work there. To be honest, I loved where I worked, but I thought I'll go and and see what they've got to say. And I got talking, and it was a management role. I'd never been in a purely management role, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a go, because it was about spending more. By this stage, I got over the fact that I wasn't ever going to be a great baby mum, but I was definitely a great kid mum. I loved having kids. So I took this job in York, and I started off there managing a team of catastrophic injury lawyers, and then went on to be head of department, and then a director of the business.
And you still had your own clients as well?
No, okay. Never had a client when I was there at all. So I just looked after people. And what a big department. I think at the most it was about 150 people.
Just in your department?
I looked after the serious injury department, and I also looked after a couple of other departments as well. So about 150 to 200 people. And that was such a journey. I never thought ever in my life that I end up wanting to go into management. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I look back on that period now and think, crikey, how much did I learn there? So much. And I learned that I loved seeing other people succeed. And I remember going in one weekend. I can't remember what had happened. Something had happened. There'd been, I don't know, somebody had left or somebody, I don't know what happened. But basically I went in on a weekend, and there was some kind of trainee solicitors there to come in to help me. And we literally had to just kind of overhaul an entire area of work and kind of get in touch with all the clients. And it was absolute mayhem. And I looked at them all and I thought, crikey, they're all here on a weekend, and they're all, doing everything they can. How wonderful is this? They were just amazing. The teamwork was amazing. And I remember when I walked in feeling, and this is going to sound really bad as well, but I remember feeling like it was like they were like a part of your extended family. I felt a responsibility, and I felt so very proud. And that's when I realised that it was okay not to have clients anymore, because I've got people that have got clients, and I can support them to be better. And I loved it, absolutely loved it there.
And is that what led to Hudgell's?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've been at Minster Law for about 7 years again. I've got like a 7-year itch thing coming on, I know.
Oh, how many years have you been at Hudgell?
And yeah, I don't know. I just thought that I needed a change. It felt like I had people that were working for me that were so good. And they needed an opportunity to grow as well. I kind of felt like I'd done my stint, if you like. And so I went to them and said, look, I think I want to do something different. I was in a job. I was a director of the company. You couldn't just say, oh, I'm going, by the way, I've got another job. So I had to have a conversation with them and say, look, I think it's about time. They were supportive of that. So I had a 6-month notice period, which I worked. And within that period, I got chatting to this chap called Neil, and ended up. It wasn't by design. It was just I ended up chatting and ended up going into my current role at Hudgell's as my first CEO role.
And am I right in thinking it was a new role? Neil didn't have a chief
No, he
exec.
did have a CEO. She was moving. She wanted to move down to London to run the London office, and she went into the judiciary. So, he was looking for somebody to be based in the north, obviously, with our head office being in Hull. It was I said to him, I remember I had a series of interviews with Neil. the first call I think was about 3 a.m. actually.
3 a.m.
Yeah, he sent me an email, or I sent him an email saying, I'm free to chat, let me know when. And he just said, well, actually, I'm free now. I'm waiting for a flight. Now, I don't sleep. I never have been able to sleep. So I'm always awake in the middle of the night. And so I said, well, yeah, I can ring you now if you want. So we spoke, I think he was in Hong Kong, and we ended up having a chat about 3 a.m. And then I met him at McDonald's, and I met him in a cafe in Selby, all kind of really
glamorous
short
places.
Yeah, really glamorous. Tricked me into having a piece of cake in Selby as well, which I've never allowed myself to do. So yeah, it was just some really short kind of catch ups, and then he offered me the role, and then COVID hit.
Yeah, so you joined, I'm right, in 2020.
Yeah,
3 years ago.
I was due to join maybe 1st of March, something like that. And I ended up joining 1st of April because, well, there was nobody there for a start. It was the middle of the start of the pandemic. And I'd never been to Hull before in my life.
So you took the job without having gone to Hull?
No, I did go to Hull in the run-up to starting. I drove to the fruit market car park.
Yeah.
And then I walked to the office and back.
Which isn't far from the fruit market car park.
No, it's just around the corner. But I remember thinking, crikey, I don't even know how far it is. How am I going to get there? And it's probably, I'm not a fast driver. So I'm a steady driver. So that goes back to, I was a magistrate for 10 years and used to get in terrible trouble if you got caught speeding. I'm always a steady 60 on a motorway. So it takes me about 1 hour, 45, 2 hours to get to work.
And that's every day?
Every day. Well, I tend to be 3 or 4 days now. I'll try and get at least 1 day a week from home. Yeah.
So how does that work for you, that commute? Because that is a serious commute. So that's a lot of time in your car, 4 hours a day. So what are you thinking about? What are you doing in that time?
I do listen, actually. I do listen to a lot of podcasts in the car.
Especially the Pacecast.
Yeah, especially the Pacecast, that's right. And I do... I often have calls in the car, so I'll have. Sometimes it's quite easy it's easier to have a catch up with a colleague on the phone than it is when you're, in the office being pestered by other people. So sometimes I schedule a call with somebody. Sometimes I listen to the radio. So
let's just pick on the podcast. Other than the Pacecast, obviously, what's your chosen podcast or your
all
top
sorts?
3?
So whatever I see that comes across social media, really. So sometimes it can be legal podcasts, sometimes it's competitors podcasts, sometimes it's leadership ones, anything really.
Any light entertainment ones?
No.
Okay, that's all right.
You're going to read something into that, aren't you?
Not at all, not. In fact, I never do either. I always listen to, I tend to like business-related ones, or people who are quite provocative in some of their thoughts, or just listening to people's stories.
Yeah.
From a business background, as opposed to...
No, I think it's good. It keeps you grounded as well, doesn't it? Sometimes you think, you're tired out and, you're thinking, crikey, that life's hard. And then you listen to somebody else talk about their journey and you realise you've had it really easy, really, in comparison. Yeah. So I do like my time in the car. I often find that I miss it when I'm not in the office. I feel like I miss that thinking time because life's so busy. This job for me, the busiest I've ever been in my career, I can't imagine how I used to have time to do some of the things I used to have time for. So now it's kind of a bit of time to kind of process everything that's gone on in the day.
So what does a typical day look like for you at work? I mean, obviously getting up very early.
Yeah, everything's very different. So as I say, I don't sleep much. I've always lasted on about 3-4 hours a night.
How do you survive on that?
I've always done it. Farmer's daughter.
That's not normal though.
No. My son's exactly the same, actually. My daughter's not. She can sleep better than the rest of us, but my son's just the same as me. So
how does that work in the marital bed? I'm just wondering, with your husband next to you, you're wide awake.
I'm very lucky to be married to the most laid back of husbands who tolerates me. But no, I wake up early. I normally leave the house by about 5:45, and most days nowadays are meetings. So I have my own direct reports, so people, some heads of department that report into me that I catch up with every week. Have, finance meetings, HR meetings, marketing meetings, everything really. And the challenge is that I'm a people person, so I like to have conversations. I don't like to email. So I like to have people in the room. Sometimes my colleagues challenge me and say, "Do you really need that to be a meeting?" And I have to try and caution myself sometimes around that. But I'm very much I like to feel the vibe in the room.
Yeah.
So my week is mainly meetings. I do some proper lawyer work.
Yes, you do have some clients.
Yeah. So at the moment, the work that obviously I'm what you call COLP, so compliance officer. So every firm has to have one, and so any big risks, any high profile cases, they all have to come past me. Any complaints, not that we have many, but any complaints come past me, anything where we've got a problem. So I see those kind of cases, but I also help out on some of the bigger group action work. So at the moment I'm heavily involved in the Manchester Arena cases, and that's, I could do that. I could use my entire working week doing that.
And you still enjoy it?
I love it.
And were you involved in the post office?
Yeah, I support with that. I don't. Neil leads on that. He's still very hands-on. I get involved at certain stages, but my main focus is on the Manchester Arena cases.
Which must be. Do you find it emotionally draining working on things like that?
No, I don't really. I find it incredibly rewarding. It's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
I think that's the. What is there about it that weighs on your mind? It's knowing that there's an awful lot of people relying on you, and that fear of not being able to do as good a job as you want. So that is the biggest worry. I suppose it's probably a little bit polarized in my world because I'm one of those people that's always got a massive fear of failure. So I have to continuously push myself, and I always give myself a hard time really about everything I'm doing.
Well, I was going to ask you said earlier about you don't sleep, so I was going to ask you about what keeps you awake at night, but it sounds like, carrying the responsibility of something as huge as that. But what is there something that plays on your mind during the night to keep you awake, or are you just an insomniac?
No, I think it's just your nature, I remember I've got a really vivid memory of walking down the hill to breakfast at school. And I was always like this at school as well. I was always had a million projects going on. Always had to keep myself very busy. Time went faster if you keep yourself busy. And I remember walking down the hill one day, and I still remember it now. It must have only been about, it must have been 12, 13. And thinking to myself, I wonder if I'll ever wake up and not have a load of worries. And I look back now and think, God, that's really sad, isn't it? And that's how I try to, I spend so much time with my kids now.
How old are they now?
Oh, crikey, kids. 19 and 22.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Adults then, as opposed to kids.
Yeah. But, we chat everything through. I speak to them every day, message them all the time. They're everything,
And what do they do? Or what do they want to do? I'm presuming they're still uni.
My son works with his father and works for his dad. And my daughter is at university in Northumbria.
You mentioned.
Doing sports management.
All right. So they don't want to follow you into law then?
No. My son came to work for me for a little bit. But, he thought it was going to be like Suits,
Yes. In our day it was LA Law, but I suppose these days it's Suits, yeah.
And he spent most of his time chatting up all the ladies in the office, so it wasn't going to work out, unfortunately.
So just going back to was there anything, going back to your childhood, and you talked about being at boarding school, and you almost kind of fell into law, but was there something you wanted to be when you grew up, when you think back to your childhood?
No, I don't think there was. I've got a vivid memory of being about 8 and wanting to be a vet, but I think everybody did at 8, didn't they? I really wouldn't want to be a vet now.
Then you want to be a teacher, because you just base it on your little horizon, don't you? Your world you're living in. So teachers.
I think I just wanted to be self-sufficient. I've never really not had a job. So, from being paper girl to working on a poultry to, being a nanny, gym assistant. I've done all sorts of jobs. I've always had a job since I was, 10, maybe even 8, and I've never had a period not working. And I've only ever had, I took 6 weeks off with both my children. So I've always just wanted to know, I felt, it's funny because I sat down with my son and daughter a few weeks ago, and we were talking about careers, because obviously my daughter's at that stage in her university degree where she's got to decide what she wants to actually do at the end of it. And she was like, well, I'm like, Mum, I'm really ambitious. And my son, who is incredibly intelligent, but doesn't like to think he is. He said, well, Mum's not ambitious. If she was ambitious, she'd set up her own company, wouldn't she? She's not ambitious. Mum just is desperate for approval. And I sat there and I thought, oh my God. And I tried to laugh it off, but it's played on my mind, in that I genuinely think that I'm wired to want to do a good job.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could work for myself, because I'm desperately trying to do a job for somebody else. Does that make sense?
It does. And I wonder if it's that you said earlier about you want to make your parents proud.
Yeah, maybe.
So they clearly will be proud. I mean, you've achieved so much and you're doing so well at Hudgell's. And what do you talk to them about it now? Do they ever turn around and say how proud they are of what you're doing?
Oh God, yeah. No, I've got the best parents in the world. I'm so lucky. And it wasn't, I don't want to get emotional here, but my dad was very, very poorly. When I first started my job at Minster Law, so again back 10 years, maybe more. And he had bowel cancer. And just after he'd had his tumour removed, and they were going through, he did radiotherapy, chemotherapy, what have you. They give you a bit of a kind of pre-op treatment, a scan, if you like, to try and work out, because they're going to try and reverse his colostomy. And it all went wrong. And bowel was perforated. He went into septic shock and he went into a coma. So this was like my first month at Minster Law. And I remember being at work and getting the call, and only just getting there as his feet were going through the theatre doors. And we were told he probably wouldn't make it. I think it was about 3% chance, they told us. And I remember we all sat in this family waiting room, and then went to stay the night in this family room, which, was just, I remember going out and getting McDonald's, believe it or not. I don't know why, but everyone was hungry, and I came back with this McDonald's. But on my way to McDonald's, I remember thinking, God, who am I going to do it all for?
Oh gosh,
who's going to drive me on? Yeah. And anyway, then my father was in a coma for a while. But it was in intensive care for a long time, and in intensive care, the nurses were just phenomenal. One of them, she used to get her husband to come and stay in the town, because he was in the Friarage Hospital at Northallerton, which is only small, and she used to get her husband to come and stay so that she didn't have to leave him for too long, and they'd book her a room in the town, which just, can you imagine? Mm. Just unbelievable, isn't it? But they give you a book, because obviously you don't know if they're going to wake up or not. So we had a book my mum and myself and my brother used to write in, and we've still got this book. I was allowed to look at it once, but they keep it hidden away because it's a bit too raw to bring out, really. But they, we used to write little messages, like silly messages, like, right, we've got power of attorney now, Dad. So when you wake up, there'll be nothing left. Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. To keep it lighthearted. But anyway, he came round, but for the first few weeks, he was sky high on drugs and saying loads of things that were not my dad. My dad's a typical Yorkshire farmer, and he's not overly emotional. But he was coming out with all sorts, wasn't he? And I used to smuggle him. He loves Lucozade, and I used to smuggle it in.
Well, we're not allowed Lucozade.
No, for a while. He was for a long time. He was being tube fed, and they used to give him a sponge soaked in water, to try and wet his lips. And I used to soak it in this Lucozade. God forbid. And I remember him grabbing my hand one day and saying, "I'm very proud of you,"
Oh.
And that was it. It was worth every minute.
Oh, yeah. And how is he now?
He's really well.
Good.
He's really well. He's spent years in hospital. I think he's on his 50th operation now or something ridiculous like that. But no, he's still fighting fit. And still, and I'm still working hard for him.
Yeah, yeah. And you're doing very well, very well. Yeah. So let's just think back about over your career. Is there anything you would change or that you would do differently?
I thought you might ask me that question, so I did think about that this morning. I don't. If you change, in my mind, in my simple mind, if you change something, then where you are now might be different. So I don't think I'd consciously change anything because, I feel, putting everything else aside, I'm the luckiest person in the world because I've got the most wonderful family. And I can, I know everyone's a bit biased, but my kids are definitely the best kids in the world. They are, So I feel like I wouldn't want to change that. I sometimes look back now and think, I wish I spent more time with them. But, my kids have got so much independence as a consequence of that. They've got, I always laugh at, I met one of my son's friend's mothers in the supermarket at the weekend, and she goes, "Oh, you're Ross. He's so wonderful. He's like part of our family." And this is what it's like. They've got these extended families of all these parents that used to have them for tea every night.
So they're sociable. So without realising it, you've taught them all these life skills.
Yeah. I don't know. I had my kids very young. If I had them, I have lots of colleagues now that have having children, have had children later in life, earlier in life, and I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer. I say, you never really know. And I'm nowadays, the world's so much more flexible, isn't it? I mean, well-being was never talked about in my day, and I didn't have a choice. I had to go back to work. Yeah. So I think it was fine, but I think if would I do things differently now? I don't know. I think they've turned out all right in spite of it. But I see them now, and they're off university, jobs, girlfriends, boyfriends, and you think, crikey, they've gone, and what am I going to do with my life?
But you still got your work.
I still got work. It's a bit sad, that, isn't it? But I keep saying, well, you need to have some grandkids, then I can do that.
But don't you think that's our job as mums? Our job is to bring them up and teach them right from wrong, and then kind of let them go.
Yeah, it's the hardest. I don't let mine go. I've got a tracker on them.
Well, mine, talking about when to have children, I had my children later in life, and they're one's just turned 14 and the other one's about to turn 12 this coming weekend, actually. And I can't imagine what it's going to feel like when they're ready to fly the nest. No. And I know it's heartbreaking for all mums and dads. You
cry your eyes out. That's what I did.
As much as they drive me mad, I just can't imagine. And God only knows what me and Adam will talk about when we haven't got the kids.
No.
That will test our marriage. Anyway, moving on. So what about you as a person? If you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be?
It's a tricky one. I'd probably be more patient. I want everything yesterday. And it's taken me a long time to learn, and obviously being in leadership roles has helped with this, to realise that not everybody is wired the same. And I can genuinely say that the majority of the decisions I make, I do with the good of everyone at the heart of them. I'm very good at compartmentalizing feelings and business decisions. Don't know how. I did it when my kids went to nursery and I went to work. I kind of closed one door and got in the car and went to work. And I was very good at that. But I have realised that, and it's taken me a long time to learn that actually people are not all wired the same, and you have to bear that in mind when you are communicating things to people. Trying to share ideas with people. You need to remember that. So, and I'm incredibly impatient. We talked a wee while ago, didn't we? Before we started today, Anita, about colours, and I'm a red. And they always say that the red person's the person that when they call the lift, they press the button 10 times, and that's me. And I wish I could slow down a bit. My husband tells me that all the time.
Yeah, we're very similar actually. When you describe yourself, I think, God, you're talking about me as well.
Well, I think there's a lot of that's the other thing, isn't there? There are lots of people out there. You're not unique.
Yeah.
But I think I've learned as well over the last few years that it's okay to show weakness. And I've got a team around me now. I mean, I've had teams around me everywhere I've worked. Some really phenomenal people. I often think I was at a funeral a few months ago, and I sat there, and I had this moment where I thought, "Oh my God, everyone at my funeral will have to be work people because I don't know anybody else.
I haven't got any friends outside work."
I thought, "Oh my God, this is a really big issue. Who's going to come?" So. And then I spent half an hour saying to my kids, well, don't forget, these are the people that I worked with at Owen Mitchell. These are the people I worked with at this is who you've got to ring. Otherwise, no one will come and you'll be really embarrassed. But, but in all fairness, they're not just work colleagues. I've had work everywhere I've worked, being fantastic people.
I can imagine what I know of you and based on how I know you, that everyone you've come into contact with, whether it's a client or someone you've worked with, you would have established and built a very strong relationship with them because you're so open and so warm and you're so easy to talk to, and I can't imagine anyone not being your friend.
Oh, well, I'm sure there's a few people that don't feel that way out there. But I genuinely go, I think I started by saying that I genuinely go into everything wanting to do a good job for everybody. And more recently, what I've learned is that, the people that are around you, they can help fill your gaps, can't they?
Absolutely.
Because you can't be good at everything. No.
Yeah.
And I don't suppose I was ever going to be the most technically gifted lawyer. I don't do detail for a start, so that kind of writes off half of the legal careers you can have. I'm very much about getting an outcome, talking things through. But when it comes to the technical detail, I've got people around me now that love that.
Yeah, and they say, don't they, as a good leader, you surround yourself by people who are better than you at different things, and that's what makes a great team. So I'm just conscious of time, so just to wrap up then, so what does the future look like for you? What's left to achieve? You've achieved a huge amount in your career to date, and again, congratulations on your success with Hudgell. But what's left? What do you want to do? Is it another 7-year move, is it?
I have no idea.
Are you enjoying what you're doing now?
I love it. Yeah, no, I love it. I feel very fortunate. To say that really,
in case Neil's listening.
Yeah. No, I have quite, I have a good open dialogue with Neil around me and my future. And the honest answer is I'm very much wedded to my job at the moment. I have, since my son dropped that psychological counselling bomb on me the other day, I have thought, crikey, at what stage in life are you going to actually do anything else other than work really, really, really hard for somebody else?
But if it's part of your DNA, though, it's sometimes hard to be. You've got to be true to yourself, and if that's what you enjoy and that's how you feel fulfilled, it doesn't mean it's wrong.
I've still got quite a bit to do. I'm still learning, and that's a big motivator for me. I feel compelled to want to learn something. So you talked earlier about podcasts and stuff. If I don't know the answer to something, I will Google it. I love to learn new things, and I'm still learning. I've still got a lot to learn. It's my first CEO role, and some things I think I've done all right at. Some things I've been horrendous at, and I'm learning every day still. So when I run out of things to learn, which could be an awful long time, then I'll maybe do something different.
Well, I look forward to seeing what the future holds for you and for Hudgell's. And it's been great chatting with you today. And I really appreciate you coming in and spending some time with us. It's been a fascinating story. So thank you. So before you go, we have a question here that was left by our previous guest. Our previous guest didn't know who the question was going to be left for. So it's quite a nice question, I think, reading it now and having heard your story. So the question is, if you could offer any advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Oh, that's a really difficult one. Take a breath, slow down, look left and right and not just forwards.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
I think that's probably... They're the only times where I've... when you have moments in your life where you think... You just cringe remembering a situation.
Oh, I have many.
Yeah. And I think if I'd been able to advise myself of that, some of the things that I'd done wouldn't quite be so cringeworthy.
But those cringeworthy moments have made us who we are.
Yeah, they have indeed.
Character building. But a brilliant answer, thank you.
No problem.
Right, well, that's it for today. Thank you ever so much for joining us. If you'd like to get in touch, please do so via our normal social channels. We'd love to hear from you. And if you've got any suggestions about who you'd like to hear on the Pacecast, please do let us know. Until next time, it's bye-bye from me. Thank you.